Picture this: a hillside in Galilee. Thousands of people sitting on the grass, shoulder to shoulder, straining to hear. They had heard teachers before, dozens of them. But something was different that day. When Jesus finished speaking, the people didn't applaud. They didn't nod politely. They sat in stunned silence, because what they had just heard shattered every rule they knew about how a teacher was supposed to speak. Matthew records it plainly. The crowds were astonished because he taught them as one having authority, and not as their scribes. Those last 6 words changed everything. Not as their scribes. That wasn't a compliment. That was an alarm. Because in the world of first-century Judea, teaching without the right kind of authority wasn't just unusual, it was dangerous. And the people in power knew it. To understand what happened next, you need to understand one thing about the Jewish world of the first century. Authority was everything, not talent, not wisdom, not even miracles. Authority. When a rabbi stood up to interpret the Torah, the sacred law of Moses, he didn't just speak his own opinion. He cited a chain. He named his teacher, his teacher's teacher, and the teacher before that, all the way back to Sinai if possible. The Mishnah, the great collection of Jewish oral law, is filled with this pattern. Rabbi Akiva said in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, who said in the name of Rabbi Joshua. That chain wasn't tradition for tradition's sake. It was accountability. It was legitimacy. It was how the community knew this teaching comes from a recognized source. It can be traced. It can be tested. If you taught without citing your source, you were making a claim, a massive one. You were saying, "My words don't need a chain. My words stand on their own." In the entire history of Israel, only one category of person had ever done that: the prophets. "Thus says the Lord." Not Rabbi Hillel said, not the school of Shammai teaches. Thus says the Lord. So when Jesus opened his mouth and taught the same way, without citations, without chains, without bowing to any human authority above him, the crowd didn't know whether to worship him or run. Some would do both. Listen to the words. Really listen. In Matthew chapter 5, Jesus is sitting on that hillside and he begins to teach. And 6 times, he uses a phrase that had never been heard from any rabbi in Israel. "You have heard that it was said." And then, "But I say to you." You have heard it said, but I say. He wasn't refining the law. He wasn't choosing sides between Rabbi Hillel and Rabbi Shammai. He wasn't even appealing to Moses. He was placing his own voice above all of it, above the tradition, above the teachers, above the entire chain. The crowd heard it. The Pharisees heard it. The scribes heard it. And in that moment, a clock began ticking. Because what Jesus had just done, in public, in front of thousands, was declare that his authority came from somewhere beyond the human system entirely. Not from a school, not from a lineage, not from any institution that could credential him, control him, or correct him. The establishment had one question. It was urgent. It was not academic. Where does this man's authority come from? And who, exactly, authorized it? 3 years later, Jerusalem. Jesus has just walked into the temple, the holiest site in all of Judaism, and turned it upside down. Tables overturned, money scattered across the stone floor, doves flying loose. It was not a quiet protest. It was a declaration, and the men who ran that temple came to him immediately. The chief priests, the scribes, the elders of the people. These were not ordinary men. These were the most powerful religious figures in all of Israel. Men who decided what was law and what wasn't. Men who could, and eventually would, hand someone over to Rome for execution. They asked him 2 questions. Both of them cut straight to the core of everything. By what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority? It is the most direct challenge in the entire gospel narrative. No parables, no crowds to hide in, just Jesus, face to face with the full weight of institutional power. Notice what they are really asking. Not, are you breaking the law? Not, do you have the right theology? They are asking, who authorized you? Because in their world, no authority was self-generated. Priests were validated by bloodline, sons of Aaron, traceable for centuries. Scribes were certified by years of study under approved masters. Even prophets needed public authentication by the community. Everything legitimate had a visible, verifiable source. Jesus had none they could see, and that was exactly the point. Jesus didn't answer their question directly. He asked them one instead. John's baptism, was it from heaven or from men? It was a trap they couldn't escape. If they said from heaven, he would ask why they didn't believe John. If they said from men, the crowd would turn on them because the people loved John as a prophet. So they said nothing. And Jesus said, then neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. But the answer came later, in the darkness of a trial that never should have happened. Mark 14, the high priest, in the middle of the night, stands before Jesus and asks the question that would end everything. Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? And Jesus said, I am. 2 words, the most dangerous 2 words in the ancient world. Then he went further. You will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, coming with the clouds of heaven. He was quoting Daniel chapter 7, the vision of the Ancient of Days, the throne of God himself, and the Son of Man being given dominion over all nations and all time. He wasn't claiming a rabbi's authority. He wasn't claiming a prophet's authority. He was claiming the authority that belongs to God alone. The high priest tore his robes. That was the moment. That was the answer to every question they had asked since that hillside in Galilee. Not a school, not a lineage, not a chain of rabbis. God himself. The trajectory of Jesus' ministry follows a single relentless line. Teaching authority, temple authority, messianic authority, divine authority. Each step was bolder than the last. Each step was more destabilizing to the system. And each step brought the confrontation closer to its inevitable end. In John chapter 7, the religious leaders marveled and said, how does this man know letters, having never studied? He had no degree, no certification, no approved master behind his name. In John 5:18, they sought to kill him because he called God his own Father, making himself, in their understanding, equal with God. Everything circles back to the same question. Who is this man? By the time he stood before Pilate in Luke 23, the charge had shifted from theological to political. He claims to be a king, authority teaching, authority over the temple, authority as Messiah, authority as king. The system had no category for what he claimed to be, and what it cannot categorize, it eliminates. But here is what 2,000 years have made clear. The questions they asked in those temple courts never went away. They just moved from the mouths of chief priests into the hearts of every person who ever heard his name and had to decide what to do with it. The crowds on that hillside were astonished. They had never heard anyone speak like that. And neither, if we're being honest, have we. The question was never casual. Who gave you this authority? It is still the question, not a historical curiosity, Not a theological puzzle for scholars to debate in quiet rooms. It is the question that every single person who encounters Jesus eventually has to answer for themselves. Because Jesus didn't leave a middle ground. He didn't say, "I am a great teacher. Take what you like and leave the rest." He said, "I am." He invoked the name of God. He claimed dominion over heaven and earth. He spoke as if death itself had no final word over him. And then he proved it. The institutional authority of Jerusalem could not hold him. The sealed tomb could not hold him. The verdict of the most powerful empire in the world could not hold him. 2,000 years later, his words are still being read. His name is still being spoken. And the question the high priest asked in that midnight trial is still echoing, not in a courtroom, but in the quiet of every human soul that ever had to reckon with what he said. Who do you say he is? That is not a question this channel can answer for you, but it is a question worth taking seriously. If this investigation stirred something in you, if it opened a door you want to walk through further, the next video goes deeper into what happened after the verdict, into what the empty tomb meant for the very system that condemned him. Stay with us. The story is far from over.